Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special episode of the Codex Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Sonny Kruger, and with me, as usual, are my co-hosts, Jamie Wilczyk and Tim Morse. Today, we have a special guest, the legendary artist, Darryl Banks.
Hi, everybody.
Darryl, thank you again for being on. We do appreciate it, and you taking the time out for us. It's great just to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Darryl. Jamie has a question to ask.
Yeah. So, something I always wondered is there anything right now that you're reading currently that you're just infatuated with, or anything modern? Do you even have a pull list? Like, are you still keeping up with modern comics?
Not really. It's more like spending the time just doing them. I have the Marvel Unlimited digital subscription, and it's more like I think I follow artists more than actual characters or stories. With some exceptions. And I like that on the homepage, it'll suggest things. And it suggested this Squadron Supreme. So I think I started that recently. But I tend to read older stuff on the average, especially, real old stuff I grew up on, like Jim Starlin's almost anything. Captain Marvel, Adam Warlock, that sort of thing. But as far as modern, modern to me, modern as far as actual chronologically, not really. I was reading, I can't think of the name of it. Fear Itself. Crossover Fear Itself, because it had a lot of art by Stuart Immonen, who's actually, he influences my work. One of those, I look at his work and go, that's how I want to draw when I grow up, even though he's younger than me. But yeah, that's probably about the extent of it at the moment.
What artists right now, with what you're looking at, like on Marvel Unlimited or anything like that, have really caught your eye at the moment?
I've had the same influences for decades. I'm going to always like Alan Davis. He's probably my biggest influence. Brian Hitch. I mentioned Stuart Immonen. Yesterday, I was watching an interview with Olivier Coipel, getting his story for his background, because I never knew it. I just knew his artwork, and to be so young, his work. He's a prodigy. You've seen those, like, it's a 3-year-old who can play the symphony orchestra. He's young. Work far exceeds his youthful age, and so just hearing his story was very amazing to me. So yeah, I love his work as well.
Right on.
Cool. We have a thing on our regular podcast called On the Hunt, where sometimes either we talk about like something new we're on the hunt for, or even something older. And how you're mentioning right now, like they usually collect older stuff. Is there a certain comic that you're on the hunt for that you've been after for a while?
It's kind of funny. Some of the comics I'm on the hunt for, I own. I just don't know which there are, because at one point, as a collector, I collected more to help me understand how comics were supposed to be over the years, because date myself, but there was no internet, there was no YouTube, so to learn about drawing, a lot of it I had to try to figure it out myself. I went to college, but I went to college for more commercial art. The comics was all pretty much self-taught, so most of my collection's in a jumble. So yeah, I'll think of something I feel like reading, I'm like, okay, I'm in the hunt in this closet. I'm in the hunt in this long box. It's around here somewhere. I wanted to find my collection of the old ROM Space Knight, because that was a Marvel comic, but it's not allowed to be on their unlimited streaming since he was a licensed character.
Yeah, right. Isn't he licensed through Hasbro?
Well, back then it was through Parker Brothers.
Okay.
Hasbro owns it, I think, now, but back then, yeah, it was through Parker Brothers. So I don't know how that would work nowadays. But what else? Some of my old Micronauts with Michael Golden. I don't think that's on the digital unlimited either. So that's my version of In the Hunt. It's like In the Hunt, like a hunt inside my own home. So
I get, yes, Jesse, many comic collectors have that same problem, like because you have so much. Where is it? Yeah.
especially when you go through and you're like, oh, I do own this. What? Okay, I
Right.
didn't need to buy 3 more copies of
Yeah.
it.
Well, Daryl, there was a question that I wanted to ask you. When you were on the path to becoming a professional comic book artist, what was it like when you were doing that? And if you sent out pieces of your work to get letters from Marvel or DC or any other companies that you did you receive rejection letters? And if so, how did you handle that when that happened?
Oh, well, rejection letters, back in the day when they used to do that sort of thing. I don't think they do anymore if they even look at samples. But, back in the 1800s when I was starting, yeah, you would get a printed, it was a form letter. It was signed by whoever was handling that sort of thing at the time. But I had so many, and I wish I saved it because it was a stack. It looked like a phone book. And I've told that story so many times. I really wish I'd kept them because I think people think I'm exaggerating. That like, oh, how many was it? Like, no, it was a lot because I was just not going to quit. It was like I was going to pursue, this left and right. But a lot of them tend to say the same thing. Now, DC's were always a little bit more specific, but I always enjoyed. It felt like your samples are interesting, and we could tell you worked very hard on them. That was almost like saying, she has a nice personality, like, oh, so you don't like my work. So the best advice I got didn't actually come from mailing it in. It was whenever I could see editors in person. Now, back in the 80s, if it was a show that even if it had as little as 300 people, Marvel and DC set up and had booths. So you could, actually talk to editors in person then. And of course, I wasn't traveling much, and most of this was in the Ohio, Indiana area. So I would, show my work, and I just noticed back, when I was starting, my goal was to work with Marvel. I wanted to draw the Avengers. That was the goal. But I noticed Marvel was always generic with their advice, but DC was always very pinpoint specific on what my work needed. And I kept thinking, you know what? I have a feeling I'm going to end up with DC, but that's okay, because they're also a top company. But I remember with Marvel, it seems like everything was funny, like the critique had like this humorous bent. And I'm like, yeah, I get you want to be friendly, but I seriously need to know, what do I need to work on?
You need good constructive criticism,
right? I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't constructive, but it was just very general. I mean, it could almost tell anyone starting out. But with DC. The editors that I would see, they would be in suit and tie with business cards, and they would say, I think you can work on this, that, and other. Send me more samples after you've done, worked on these things. And I noticed I had at least, let's say, 25 things I was terrible at. So from getting that feedback, so I took a notebook, not unlike this one, where I had so many things I could flip over and write what I was bad at. And I noticed when I would do the next round of samples, I could cross something off the list that I felt like they didn't mention anymore. And I remember getting down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm thinking it could be any day now. And then shortly thereafter, I got my first work with them. But that wasn't until 5 years after I'd done work in the independents. But I mean, not to discount my independent work, because that was like going to school in many ways. Right. But that's how my initial sample went. It was in by sending work through the mail, but the best came from in person. And really, when you think about it, because to be an effective artist, it isn't just how well you draw. Because back when I used to teach at the school I graduated from, I used to tell my students, how well you draw or paint or ink, that's only about maybe 60% of your success rate. The rest is going to be what I call the intangibles. How well can you communicate ideas? How well can you take criticism? Are you willing to make adjustments if necessary? Can you keep a deadline? These are things that your samples aren't going to show them. So I think when you see them in person, they can kind of get a vibe for how professional you could potentially be. And I think, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of companies set up at mid-size or smaller shows anymore. I mean, they hardly even do the larger ones anymore. But when they do, it's probably difficult to get an audience, but it's possible. But once again, it's always best to meet editors in person if possible.
Great question, Tim. I like that. And like you said, Darryl, that's good that you didn't give up and you kept going forward. And nowadays it's rejection letters are just through email.
Or they just get ignored and you
So,
never hear
email.
anything.
Yeah.
Email didn't exist when I was sending samples back in the days, so they had stone tablets.
I know how you feel, Darryl. I was there when dirt was invented, so.
No, but you did bring up a great point, and I wanted to see. You brought up like you wanted to draw the Avengers. Growing up, was there a comic that you sat there and said like, "This is what I want to do now"? Like, was there one specific one that you were just, yes, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life?
It was, growing up, I've always had my favorite heroes that I felt like I could either identify with or just kind of maybe even help me through a tough time or whatever. This is an escape.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was a little kid, it was Spider-Man. But I would say when I really wanted to pursue comics as an actual profession, it was the Avengers because of the back when Roy Thomas and Steve Englehart were writing the Avengers, and they would introduce characters that, or maybe reinvent characters. I remember Dane Whitman, the Black Knight. Now, the Black Knight pre-existed as another character, but Roy kind of took that character and sort of like revamped it. It almost reminds me of when DC took, they had Alan Scott Green Lantern, and then we had Hal Jordan. We had Jay Garrick, the Flash, then we had Barry Allen. So, we had the original Black Knight, then we had Dane Whitman. And introducing characters like the Vision and the Mantis and the Swordsman. I for some reason that era of the Avengers was just it was like a soap opera. It
was like the Wild West back then, because they were just putting characters out left and right, and a lot of them became legacy characters.
Right.
Now those characters, even they weren't so big back then, so even more and more each throughout the years are becoming bigger. Like you said, like the Swordsman, we just saw him in Hawkeye, and other characters we're just seeing become even bigger. So I wonder which other ones will become big throughout the next few years.
We shall see. I mean, I never imagined we'd have a Moon Knight TV show. Never saw that coming.
Oh no,
that coming. Just not in a million years. I'm like, Moon Knight, really? I figured because Marvel has so many characters similar to Batman, they figure, we want to steer clear from those. Like, no, here it is, and big budget as well.
Let's pick the guy with the schizophrenia and give him a Disney Plus show.
Yeah, that should be good. Yeah, coming out soon. End of the month, man. We're almost there. Once the premiere.
I've been excited for that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Darryl, like when you got in DC, I remember when we did the one shot, you had mentioned that there was kind of like a tier system, like with JLA and Superman writers and Batman writers, et cetera, et cetera. How did that feel as a first-time professional, like when you made it to the big times? How did that feel coming into that type of environment, and how did you adjust to that?
It was interesting, the fact that it existed at all. I mean, since I knew nothing about how they operated, I think the interesting thing is there's how you think the comic industry operates, and then how it actually operates.
Yeah.
And it varies from editor to editor. It varies from company to company. I mean, back in the 90s, when I actually got to visit the Marvel office and the DC office, they looked like two completely different industries. I mean, the Marvel office looked like any business office, except it had some Marvel posters here and there. But the DC office looked like a theme park with and interactive this, that, and the other, and a phone booth with Superman flying out of it. It was kind of like, okay, now where's the coaster again? All right, where's the it was something else. I mean, they poured some effort into it. I mean, the Marvel office, it wasn't bad, but it looked like an office. The most decorative I think I remember seeing is they had these huge double glass doors with a spider web pattern etched into it, and I think inside their conference room they had a full-size Spider-Man figure or something like that. But that was about it. That's all I remember seeing. But that being said, it was still great saying, "Hey, I'm at Marvel." I mean, the little kid in me is going, "This is where it happens," you know.
Yeah.
House of Ideas.
Yeah, it was the literal house of ideas. I'm like, Stan Lee has walked around these hallways and had meetings and all that sort of stuff. Of course, you know, DC. This was back when they were still in New York. I mean, now I don't know if they may have some financial offices in New York, but they're pretty much all in California now.
Mhm.
Of course, you know, I haven't been to either in so many years. I mean, the work I'm doing with DC now, that's, you know, all the emails, it seemed like it's centered coming out of California. So, but yeah, but back then, learning, you mentioned about the tier system, that didn't really become really something I took note of until I noticed certain things that we could or couldn't do in the Green Lantern book. I remember I noticed anytime we wanted to have Batman related to anything, there were so many hoops it seemed like my editors had to go through. It's almost like it was a crossover with another company. I mean, when I did the funeral for Hal Jordan, you know, there were so many rules about, okay, well, Batman and Robin and all them, they can't be amongst everybody else during the funeral. They have to be off somewhere else watching from afar. Like, so I had them in, because Kyle made like a giant cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
And Batman and they were up in rafters or whatever looking down. You know, why, I don't know, but that didn't bug me the most about that. It was, we also had to coordinate with the Hawkman office. And they were like, Hawkman was such a, and by their own admission, was such a mess at the time. Could we use him? Could we not use him? Hawkman, Hawkgirl, could we use them or not? Yes, no. And it was kind of like, we'll get back with it. Okay, yeah, you can use them. So they were in panels, and then next thing you're like, no, wait, no, you can't use them. But it had already been drawn. So production had to kind of white out wherever they appeared. And
Wow.
those characters, in case you don't know, those wings are a big composition.
Yes.
So suddenly them not being there just looked like these huge blank spaces. It's kind of like, well, couldn't you compose a little better? Like, I did, but they had to be taken out. Wow.
That's got to be super frustrating.
It was, but still, once again, thinking like, wow, I'm drawing all the major, you know, DC heroes all in one issue. So that was fun, you know.
Yes, I actually have that one. So like hanging up is what it's up there.
Good,
so
good.
it's definitely one of the ones that I go to, because just to see your artwork through all those characters from a different kind of perspective, art wise, was amazing to see.
Thanks.
It was just cool. I was going to ask you about like cons and things like that. You know, how was your experience going to something like a Comic-Con and, you know, being an artist and having people come up to you and being like, I'm a fan of your work. How is it? Or how was it, especially in the beginning?
In the beginning, it was something that I remember. It was a goal that I really never thought. I mean, I did think it, but it was one of those things where it was surreal when it started to come together. I remember one of my first conventions I ever did. This was back when I was still in the independent companies, because I did that for half a decade before DC came along. And I remember being at a show right here in town, and I was near the entrance, and George Perez was also a guest, because I remember showing him my samples while I was there. But I saw this couple come in, and like the wife said to the husband, like, who is Darryl Banks? I kind of, almost like, yeah, we got George Perez over here, but who's this guy? I mean, it was under a breath, but I kept saying, it wasn't insulting, it was more like, because who was I? I said, one day people are going to come to a convention and they're going to know who I am, and I'm going to make sure that I'll have the body of work where that would no longer be a question. And I feel that I've done that, and it's a great feeling.
Yes.
What's weird is that when younger artists are asking me questions, it reminds me of things I used to ask on the other side. It was like, wow, so I'm now the older artist that the younger artists are asking me questions. That's something that just it just never really soaks in. Like, wow, so I'm the old guy now. But here's the thing: if I'm at a show, I remember I was at a show with Garcia Lopez. It was at Motor City Comic Con, and everyone wanted to see him, myself included. So, as he would get up and walk around, I'm like, this is my chance to take a selfie or something. It's like, even though I'm a professional, I'm still a fan, just like everybody else, when it comes to like the really huge icons. Same thing was I had a show with, I mean, whether it's Steranko. I remember there was a show I did with Steranko, and they said, "Oh, we heard he doesn't really do selfies, that sort of thing." And I'm like, "Oh, you did? Well, let me ask him." So I asked him, "Can we take some pictures together?" "Yeah, do as many as you want." I'm like, maybe they didn't ask nice, but it's kind of like, I mean, that sounds funny, but you'd be surprised. A lot of, I think, communication skills maybe could use a little work, but I'm like, if you say please, So I took quite a few, and I'm like, it was great. But once again, even though I was a fellow guest, just like he was, when it came to the fans, we were all on the same level. I grew up on his work, and he's still doing amazing things.
Well, it's like with some of those artists or writers, the people that they have with them, their entourage or their handlers.
Yes.
Like you said, with communication, what they communicate to them and what the artists and writers in turn communicate to their fans usually are two different things. And an example of that is when I went to Wizard World in Nashville with my stepson at the time, and we went up to see Mike Grell. Mike Grell is one of my favorites, and I had Longbow Hunters in my hands to get it signed. I didn't even make it 2 steps to him, and the guy that was with him was like, "Nope, Grell's not doing anything right now. You'll have to come back." And Grell was like, "No, wait a minute, let them come over here." And he was in the middle of doing commission artwork, and he took the time out to stop and talk to me and my stepson, sign my books, and point out things on the inside of Longbow Hunters. This is what I wanted to do. This is what they told me I had to do. This is where I put my foot down. This is why this is the way that is. That was a unique experience, and one I was very happy to be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mike is great. I did a show with him in Colorado once. We did a panel. It was me and a few others. And while we were on the panel, he did a quick headshot of Doctor Strange. Now, for him, it just seemed all simple. I don't remember what the topic was. They're asking questions, and I'm just sitting here watching him sketch. It's kind of like someone say something. I'm up on stage. I'm like, huh? Oh, I'm just, once again, I'm a pro and a fan. It was kind of like just like everybody else was mesmerized. So was I. It was also Mike and I got to share a book when it's back in 2020, the Green Lantern anniversary issue.
Yeah, I was just showing the guys that too, because it was one of mine.
And so does Mike. It was kind of like, yeah, Mike Grell and I, we are in the same book. Yeah.
Yeah, right before we did this game, he was showing us that book. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I was like, look at the artwork in here in Legacy 4. I was, going through the stash. Obviously, I was on the hunt for my own stuff for research.
On the hunt.
Yes. Well, I do kind of want to break into some Green Lantern talk, if that's cool with you.
Yeah. Right.
Especially because we did have Ron Mars on in a one shot like we had you, Darryl. Sonny was fortunate enough to get a couple minutes to talk to him. I just want to know, what was the creative process between both of you? Was it like how did it flow? Was it just like right off the bat it was great, or was there some like, hey, I wanted to go this way, I wanted to go another way, or was it more just both of you contributed your own and the ideas flowed together well?
Ron, we connected from day one, okay. Minute one. Now, when I first started, he wasn't the writer. It was, what was his name? Jerry Jones, I think. And I had actually done maybe 6-7 pages or so. And then, editorial, whatever, we're like, no, this is not what this is not what we want. We're taking this in a whole nother direction. Because it all started with a little event called the Death of Superman. And wherever the Death of Superman crossed over DC Books, the sales shot up. And I guess the suits panicked. Like, wow, how can we keep this going? What do we need to do? So it was the time to experiment. So with Green Lantern, according to my editor, the sales weren't doing that well. So when those crossover happened, they were like, whatever you need to do, it's wide open. So to me, that's one of the best things that can happen to a book or to a character is when the companies and the suits don't care, you have room. Think about it. Amazing Fantasy happened with Spider-Man and Stan Lee because the publisher didn't care what Stan did with Amazing Fantasy. And we got Spider-Man out of that. Marvel didn't care what Frank Miller did with Daredevil. And we got the Daredevil run that Frank Miller put together. And wasn't that amazing?
Oh, yeah.
So whenever the suits can take a step back and let the creative people create, we can have some fun and go wild. Plus, this was the early mid '90s, so I mean everything was crazy. We had Image and all that kind of stuff. So, with working with Ron, I noticed, even though he's a writer, because he has so many friends in his immediate New York area he lived in, he's a writer, but he thinks like an artist. I mean, his scripts, they develop characters, and he also talks about this should look cool, or in this image we're going for this emotion or this type of visual. And so, you know, he's a writer that he has like the soul of a person who can draw. You know, I mean, when you're close friends with people like Bernie Wrightson and Jim Starlin and guys like that, yeah, it's going to rub off. So I noticed that he was very open to make, you know, we can go as crazy with ring creations as possible. I like, good, because the era of boxing gloves and vacuum cleaners, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's time to kind of move past that. So I had plenty of ideas, and he was like, yeah, let's go crazy with it.
Then we saw some guns and trains and everything. Yeah.
So with the creation of Kyle Raynor, then when you guys were in the middle of that, how did that process work? Was it a collaboration between both, or when Ron was writing the script, did he just kind of leave it open for you to create that visually?
Because of what we were putting together, I mean, it was myself, Ron, and the editor, because it was, I think there was a lot of pressure, like, you guys are going to be creating a whole nother character that we really want to get some traction with, and we'll see what happens. But I remember, like, you know, there were so many costume designs that we went through with Kyle. Many I'm so glad that no one ever saw. Remember, this is the era of Image, and I'm thinking, you know, he should look like it. My editor goes, no, we want to keep this relatively simple, because it, you know, 22 pages of this, you'll thank me that we kept it simple. Of course he was right. But now with Parallax, that I pretty much got in maybe 1-2 takes, because I knew right away what I kind of wanted him to look like. But as far as working with Ron to develop Kyle as a character, he had some very specific things he wanted to do with it. I mean, number one is Kyle was heavily influenced by Peter Parker, heavily influenced. But I feel that they're different enough that I don't feel like it just feels like he's a Walmart great value version of Peter Parker. You know, he's his own guy.
To be honest with you, I have never thought that Kyle in any way was a representation of Peter Parker. I from the beginning, I've seen both of those as two very unique characters.
Good. That was concern for a minute there. I mean, even down to the whole Alex death of girlfriend or whatever, it was, you know, we knew we needed a reason for Kyle to want to be a superhero, because just like Peter Parker, you know, he didn't want to be a superhero at first. It was the death of Uncle Ben. So, you know, Ron was like, he needs an Uncle Ben. Can't make it an uncle. That would be a little bit too obvious. So he was like, or it'll be a girlfriend. So now what nobody saw coming, especially even editorial, is that as many letters they got of what happened with Hal becoming Parallax, they got even more letters about the death of Alex. And it was
the refrigerator.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the character. She had only been around for 3-4 months, maybe. Whereas Hal Jordan has been around before I was born. So, but of course, we'll probably get back to the Alex the Fridge later. But as far as, you know, the early stages of developing Kyle, you know, it was, we all, you know, had our conference calls and put our heads together on what we wanted to say with the character. People say, "Oh, was it my idea for Kyle to be an artist?" No, it was not. I was informed that that's what they wanted to do, but I was all for it. But no, that actually wasn't my idea. Mine was more the visual side of it. You know, what he looked like and the things he was going to create, what they're going to look like.
Right on. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And like with him being influenced by Peter Parker, I guess, like what you said with his girlfriend and things like that, where he needed the Uncle Ben moment. Right. That makes sense too. You know, like what they say, hindsight is 20/20. So that looking back on the stories that I had read then to now, that makes total sense as to how he reacted to certain things and why certain things were done that way.
Do you know why they made him have a? Oh, you. What do you say?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, do you know why they what made you guys decide for Kyle Raynor to be wearing a 9 Inch Nails shirt? Like, what made you guys decide on that band?
Ron, first of all, I had no idea what that was. Ron was like, he's got to have a 9 Inch Nails shirt, and I'm thinking, is that a hardware store? What is that? That's a band. I knew it was a band. I just wanted to see his reaction. Like, so Ron was a huge 9 Inch Nails fan. So, so it's almost like whatever Ron is a fan of and what I'm a fan of, we integrated into that character. It's like I was heavily into anime back then, so was Kyle. I was big into wrestling, so was Kyle. Ron loved coffee. Kyle loved coffee. Lived. His building had a coffee house in it, so we were always putting our own personal things into this character, really. And I think one of the reasons I think Kyle's a little bit different from Peter is that we didn't focus on making the two parallels. More like Kyle is just simply, he's an everyman.
Mhm.
Hal Jordan is, Ron always made this analogy. Hal Jordan is like the hero we want to be. He's like the Chuck Yeager of Green Lanterns, whereas Kyle is us.
Yeah,
if we're
right.
walking out of the back door of a building and a little blue alien hands us this ring, it's like, what would we do? And so that's how we foundationalize how Kyle was going to be. Is what would the average person who had this kind of interest, what would they do with the ring?
See, and that also makes sense too. Like when Kyle went over to the JLA and stuff like that, and in random books, he'd be like, "Look, guys, you're big time. I'm just some dude, and I'm in the middle of all this. I don't know what I'm doing." And it'd be like Superman or Batman or Wonder Woman that's like, "No, you've got the ring. You are Green Lantern. This is
I
who
love
you
that.
are." Yeah.
I did. I remember he started out, he was with the Titans at first. And I remember thinking, what if one day he could join the Justice League? What if I could draw a character I co-created with him actually having a conversation with Superman and Batman, which that eventually happened. And it felt like I was talking to Batman and Superman. It was kind of like, that was great.
Awesome.
It was.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of my favorite covers is from the JLA run. It's Standoff. If you know which one I'm talking about, it's Kyle Raynor just standing up to Superman, and they're both staring at each other, looking like they're about to fight, and they never do in the issue.
No.
But the cover was just so iconic for me. I was just like, I needed like 4 copies.
There was a panel, because I did fill-ins for Justice League for a while, and there was a panel where Kyle and Batman were arguing. It was they were in like the Arctic or something like that. I just remember it was like snow everywhere, and they were face to face. And that's probably one of my favorite panels I've ever done, just because I'm like, here it is. This is the character talking to the guy. And the same thing as when Kyle and Superman teamed up to fight Mongol. That was one of the first, maybe by the second or third issue or whatever. It felt like, wow, I think we've got something here. But once again, this was the 90s, so it was here today, gone today. So we never thought that this was going to be a character that would be around for years and years and years. We figured, if we get a good year or two out of this, we're good. But it was like, wow. He lasted a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. Now he's a major part of the mythos of Green Lantern and DC in general.
Yeah, still going strong. He'll be around for many more years. Yeah, Raynor is
I hope.
definitely a character.
But that's that's fan support making that happen. That's fan support making that happen.
I wish we saw a little bit more in the animated universe, just a little bit, except for, hey, where's Kyle? He's off world doing something else. Like,
well, animated and live action. So many things are live action related. I think all this talk about, they're going to do a Green Lantern Corps series on HBO Max. I'm thinking, is this going to happen? Yes, no, yeah.
Well, I mean, I believe they've already casted. I think they got like the guy character for Guy Gardner, the actor for him.
Oh, right.
I've been wanting a Kyle Raynor so bad. It hurts. Like, just announce it, make it get over with it.
Season 2.
That's gonna be the opening for season 2. Is him walking out, like the end credit scene is him walking out of the club, being like, "Who's this little blue dude?"
That would be so surreal to see that in live action. I would. Wow.
Well, okay, Darryl, who would you choose to play Kyle if you had the choice, or who would you recommend?
I don't remember where it was, but I've actually done a podcast where they had a fan casting, and it was nobody I'd heard of. Because the one thing is, during my time, well, whenever I'm doing any comics, I always try to think of real people to kind of slightly base my characters on to kind of give me a target to shoot for. Howell was my take on Howell was Dennis Quaid.
Oh,
Yes.
Dennis Quaid is my Hal Jordan.
Inner Space Dennis Quaid.
Have you ever seen Wilder Napalm?
Mm-mm.
Where he had the flame powers and the costume? It was kind of like there's Parallax right there. Have you ever seen Enemy Mine?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, when he had the spacesuit on, I'm like, yeah, that's Hal. So with Donna Troy, who was my Donna Troy? Jennifer Connelly. Was my
Right
makes
on.
sense.
I see that. Yep.
But that sort of thing. But with Kyle, the main guy, I could never find anyone that I felt like that's him. So he was always made up. You know, I really wish I could find someone that I really felt like, you know, there were those who were close. I mean, I'm sure as far as acting skills, they can handle it, but there's a certain look that I just haven't really. Well, I mentioned it was another podcast was on. Someone gave some examples. It was a character who was on a show called Teen Wolf. He wasn't the main character, but it was someone on the show, and they showed a picture. I'm like, oh, he might work. So it was several examples they gave of fan casting they had for Kyle. I'm like, I probably should have written those down. I'm like, oh, those are pretty good. But no, with Kyle, I could never really nail down who I wanted to base him on. So he was just kind of whatever I came up with in my head.
That's very cool.
Yeah, one of the ones I seen, which was really weird, was like someone did. I don't remember exactly who it was, but they did like a fan casting, but they did the whole animation and everything, and it was Mark Wahlberg, but he was younger.
Oh yeah,
and it looked great, and I was like, that could be great or horrible at the same time. I don't know if his Boston accent can, you know, stick through with it the entire time.
Well, Darryl, let me ask you one more question. With the last issue you ever did for Green Lantern, how did that feel when you were going through the process of creating those pages and knowing that you weren't going to do Green Lantern anymore after that?
No, you mean the regular series or the anniversary special? You mean like just the
like when you were on your run and then
okay.
at the end of your run when you did the last issue that you were done for an extended period of time?
It was a relief because I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to leave because I wasn't sure. The main thing is, you know, you don't want to quit a job and you don't have anything lined up. And I didn't really have anything solidly lined up yet. So I wish I could have left when Ron left. You know, I mean, I Judd and I got along okay, but it wasn't the same as working with Ron because we just had a very unique dynamic. But I kind of wish that, I mean, unfortunately, when I was working with Judd, I was burnt out. I just was.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't fair to him because Judd, as you know, is an award-winning writer. And I felt like the artist that came on after me, who was that? What's his name? Anyway,
I don't remember.
he did Fantastic Four for a long time. Dale Eaglesham. I felt like Dale kind of breathed some energy into things that, you know, that kind of picked things back up. Because I looked at some of my last issues like, yeah, I could tell I was ready to go. It just felt uninspired to me. I mean, it wasn't awful, but it was kind of like, yeah, just the spark wasn't there. And I thought, you know, Judd and the book in general, you know, needs to have, you know, Kyle should always have that kind of energy to it. So, you know, on my last issue was kind of like, yeah, let's wrap this, you know, mutually. So, but yeah, it wasn't one of those. It was a sad ending. It was like, yeah, I kind of wish I could have left sooner, you know. But it was one of those things where it wasn't just from it's fun to do. It was like as a husband, a father, I need to make sure I'm still employed. I didn't want to quit a job that was guaranteed work so easily. But thinking back, you know, I kind of wish I had left a little bit sooner, you know.
Is there any characters that you're still after that you're like, I still hope one day I really work on a comic of theirs?
I mean, I still have that Avengers itch still back there. I mean, at one point when I was doing JLA fill-ins, I actually did hear from Marvel they wanted an Avenger fill-in, but it seemed like it was just one, and my JLA thing, it was several, and I didn't want to jeopardize that relationship over almost at a one night stand, a one-off type of thing. You know, it's just like, yeah, I want to do Avengers, but you know, I don't want to mess things up with me and the editor on JLA. So I said, well, maybe after I'm finished with my JLA, we can do some Avengers stuff. But that didn't happen, and they stopped taking my calls and everything else. I'm like, all right, well, I think I made the right decision then. You know, so also as far as DC, I wouldn't mind doing something with Sam. I think Sam would fit, you know, my sensibilities. The Flash, except the problem was with the Flash, there's a certain look that I would have in mind that I don't know if I'd have the time to do it. Back when George Perez was doing Justice League, he wouldn't just draw the Flash and then lines behind it. It seemed like he would always draw lots of little figures behind him, like, you know, like animation. That's the way it should look. But I'm like, knowing me, like, oh, that would kill me to have to do that. But to me, I'd have to figure it out. That's, to me, if I could do the Flash, I'd like to do it like, you know, similar to how George did it, because it gave you that sense of speed, you know. Because sometimes, you know, George being George wouldn't just have a running pose. The Flash would be doing things like, let's say, like something that's about to fall off a table, like, you know, he's reaching over, putting it back, you know, it's moving really fast. You really got a sense of, it's a still image, but you got a sense of this character's moving really fast, you know. So there's a part of me that really wants to do the Flash that way, and maybe, I don't know, maybe even create something, because you know, with Kyle, I mean, now before I was working with Green Lantern, I was doing stuff for Legion of Superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
That's something else I wouldn't mind revisiting. But while I was doing Legion fill-ins, I would say to my assistant editor, you know, I got some ideas for Green Lantern, and you know, I imagined some crazy ring creation, that sort of thing. I was just kind of blue skying it, thinking I'd probably have to be at this company in 10 years before they give me something like Green Lantern, never knowing that same assistant editor was also the assistant editor for Green Lantern. So he was going back and telling him, like, hey, this new guy, he's got some Green Lantern ideas, you know. So it was getting back to them. So that didn't happen in a vacuum. It wasn't random. It was like, you know, the word was getting back to them, like, oh, so you like Green Lantern, do you? You know, I'm like, I didn't say I like Green Lantern. So I grew up on Marvel, but I like the idea of the Green Lantern power, but it was more like, oh, I felt like the ring creations could be, I mean, a lot more elaborate, you know, especially if it's anything you could think of, you know. Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing. You have someone like Neil Adams drawing Hal Jordan Creighton boxing gloves and vacuum sweepers, but they were the best looking boxing gloves and vacuum sweepers you've ever seen, you know. But still, my idea was, you know, once again, that anime influence, like, oh, I would be creating robots and big, all that kind of stuff. So that's how that happened.
Awesome.
No, I was gonna actually ask too. You know, you talked about more of near the end of your run, and there is a character to me that actually the antagonist basically for Kyle, which was Nero. How did that come about? Because of the fact that did you guys want technically like a Yellow Lantern at that time to replace Sinestro, so he had someone as a counterpart?
That was all. Nero was 100% Judd. I just, you know, with Judd, we didn't really talk very much. I think I had maybe 2 conversations with him ever. I mean, with him, it was more like a traditional, you know, he wrote the story, sent it to editorial sent it to me, and that was it. So yeah, that was his creation, his idea. I just drew the issue. And now keep in mind, that's not a knock against Judd, because that's the standard way of things are working. But just what Ron and I had was just unusual. But with Nero, yeah, that was Judd's creation.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you, Darryl, what projects are you working on now? What's on your drawing table right now that you're working on?
There's a newer company that Ron and I are doing some work with some original characters. They haven't announced it yet, so I don't know how much I can say, but there's actually 2 stories I'm working with them, And then also for DC, I'm doing more Nubia and the Amazons. I don't know if any of you seen any
Yes.
of my
And we were talking about that before
Yeah.
you got on Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I was
I'm-
telling everyone to pick up the issues.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. So I'm
Anytime.
doing I'm not the artist on the book. I'm more like they kind of bring me in for flashbacks and covers and that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
right now I'm doing another flashback sequence in an upcoming issue, which I'm working on at the moment. That was something that I really it almost came out of nowhere. I remember I think I got back on DC's radar after doing the Green Lantern anniversary special. And then they had me do the icon for Milestone cover, which
Mhm.
I really enjoyed. And let's see. Then there was the Joker variant cover I did.
Yes.
That image looked a little
Awesome.
familiar.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little bit.
You know,
Yeah,
kind
that
of
is
looked-
awesome.
So it was one of those things where like, oh, am I like back with DC? I mean, I'm here for it, but it was surprising. So yeah, that's keeping me going here recently.
Okay.
But
It's awesome. Looking
difference
forward
now
to it.
in my older work is I'm all digital now. The only thing I do analog now is pretty much like commission work.
Mhm.
But as far as my published work, yeah, I'm all digital now.
Was that a change going from like analog work to digital? Was that an adjustment for you?
I went. I mean, it was a huge adjustment, but the more I learned it, it was more like it stopped being the monster under the bed. I mean, I was literally dragged kicking and screaming into the whole world. I mean, when I used to teach back in the early 2000s, whenever I'd send my students on break, they would talk about other classes and they would be talking about computers. And I didn't own a computer at the time. And I'm hearing, I remember hearing blah, 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 take it into Photoshop. And I remember I pulled a student aside and I said, what does take it into Photoshop mean? And so, I mean, bless his heart, he explains, step by step, you scan it and do it. And he might as well have said it in Greek or Vietnamese. I had no idea what that meant. I had no point of reference. And I thought, I'm going to need to get a computer. Every point, I could tell the writing on the walls, I need to learn this. And so step by step, I did. Now, it's one of those things where a lot of my hesitation came from what I thought it would be. But, as obviously we know, as technology gets older, as time progresses, it gets easier to use, I mean, the brushes and pens I use digitally pretty much do the same thing that my regular ones do. But once you learn how to change settings, that sort of thing. So if you have a computer that's fast enough, and you've got I use a Wacom Cintiq to work on, you're good to go, just like a sketchbook. So a lot of my hesitation to get into computers because I thought it was going to be so difficult to learn, and it really wasn't. It was more like a lot of time was wasted because it was like, the little kid thinks there's a monster under the bed, but just a whole pair of shoes. It was like that. Oh, computer, I don't know. So, but really making that transition and learning what programs are best to use to do, really that's up to the artist. And once you get a handle of that, it's just like anything else.
Nice. And then, Darryl, you did one of the first painted on comic books with Cyberpunk. How was that?
That was my first published work. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because that was supposed to be all watercolor, and I wasn't that good at watercolor. So it ended up being mixed media. It's got everything from some color pencil in there. It's got some, I think, maybe even a little marker here and there. Looking back, I mean, I really didn't understand linear perspective that well. It was more like I jumped into the deep end, but I really wanted to get published. And the company Innovation, they believed in me enough to give me the opportunity. And I did a few other things for them, just traditional with like pencil. But other than that, yeah, my first work, I remember when I first got a box of copies, I remember there was a convention in Chicago. I think it was just called the Chicago Con, not C2E2. This is years before that. I remember walking up and down the hotel hallways holding one issue, just showing people like, I got a book out. And they're like, hey, that's great. Who are you? It was like having a newborn, but my first published comic, I thought it begins, it begins. But yeah, that was Cyberpunk was supposed to be all watercolor because I think about artists I really liked that could stick to one medium, but that wasn't me. So it ended up being mixed media.
You're going to work that one, yeah.
Done.
I can imagine it feeling that's my name on there right there. That's me.
Yes, yes.
It's like, who am I? Boom.
That's gonna be that, man. And then, any questions before we do wrap it up, guys? Any more?
I thought I'd have a lot more questions. Come on, I thought I had
Oh
lots
yeah.
If any more
Come on.
questions, yeah,
You
anything?
got more questions than this.
All right. I didn't know we had
There we go. We're good.
didn't know
We're
we
glad to
had
have that.
that set there. So like with going back and seeing like the work you've done over the years with especially Kyle, was there a big transition between having Ron's idea of what Kyle should be to what Judd Winnick had? Because I mean, like we said, Ron is his own staple. Like there's the work he's done has been by far amazing. Same thing with Winnick. Seeing all of his work. Now, was there a difference in ideas working between the two then? Like once it transferred over to Winnick's hands, did he say like basically like, hey, I want to look like this now? Or was there just keep it the same and let's keep going with the story?
With Judd, it was just because we didn't really talk. We didn't really brainstorm that much. It was more like it was just very professional. You know, he wrote the stories that he wrote, and I got it and I drew it. But like I said, at that time, I was towards the end because I was really burning out. And like I said, it wasn't fair to Judd or to DC for me to stay. And it was kind of like I didn't want to quit and they didn't want to fire me. And so I just remember we eventually just kind of came to terms. It was like, it's time to move on. I'm like, you know, so it's like I'm not really quitting. I wasn't fired, but we kind of just like, yeah, it's time to move on. I'm like, yeah, because you know, I felt like with everything that Kyle meant to fans or whatever, they needed to have the freshest talents on the book. And at that time, it wasn't me. Towards the end, it just wasn't. Just being honest, you know. But with Ron, like I said, it was a whole different dynamic. I mean, to this day, I mean, we still work together because we just have an odd chemistry. And then now it's added longevity on top of that. So it's more like, you know, we kind of understand how each of us works. So it's one of those things where I remember the longest period of time we didn't work together. I think it was probably when he was at Top Gal. But other than that, it's like, yeah, it's like Thanos, like I'm inevitable. Like Ron Martin and Darryl Banks is inevitable. You know, they'll spend time apart, but they're going to do something else. You know, at some company somewhere. You know.
Let's go over to conventions for a minute. You say that you do a lot of commissions. What is the strangest request you have ever had for a commission?
Strangest.
Like one where you just had to sit back and think, should I do that?
I mean, when I first started, these probably even before I was at DC, I would get some things that seemed kind of like, I don't know, X-rated or whatever. And I'm like, that's not me. You know, I was like, you know, that's that artist over there. But as far as I'll still get things that are unusual. Someone had a stuffed, I don't know if it was stuffed animal, some little stuffed character they wanted to see drawn like as a Green Lantern. And I don't even know what the character was. And I did it, but they never came and picked it up. It was, I don't know if it was just a character that everyone knows, but I didn't. But it was almost, I imagine like something like an obscure Pokemon or something like that. It was like this little stuffed animal. Can you draw this as like a Green Lantern? I'm like, yeah. But it was at a show and they never picked it up. I'm like, but I kept the artwork because I kept thinking, what is this thing? You know? But yeah, it's still in my bag. One day, maybe the guy will show up there. Remember when I asked you? Like, oh, here it is. I never threw it away. I remember I'll get an odd pairing. I remember I did and I think I posted it on Twitter and Instagram. It was the Michael Keaton Batman and Kyle versus Michael Myers. You know, the Halloween guy with the knife.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, is that a fair fight? I mean, Michael Myers might be immortal, but it seemed like that would be a quick fight. But it was fun to do. But it was one of those. Okay, how can I make this work? I also did Thor versus a Predator, and I thought Predators are pretty powerful, but I don't think they could do much against the gun. But once again, it was fun to draw, but it was more like I kept saying, well, maybe Loki gave the Predator some kind of enhanced armor to make the fight more even or something like that. And that's going through my head as I'm drawing this.
See, and that's cool that you put that type of
Yeah.
backstory into commission artwork that you work on and give it a reason for why you're putting it on the page.
Well, because I don't want to tell myself it's stupid, because if I do, then it'll show some article won't come out right. So I'm thinking, if I feel good about the idea, subconsciously I'll put the effort into it, because no matter whether it's for DC, Marvel, or commission for a person at a convention, I put the same amount of effort into everything I do. It's just one of the things I promised myself if I ever became a professional is treat everybody with respect and give it your best. And so it could be difficult coming with trying to come up with an idea for something that I thought, well, these two things go together. But really, that's what a professional has to do. I mean, whether it's a writer or no matter what you do, is that there's going to be things there'll be head scratchers, but like, okay, that's the challenge. How do you make this work? I mean, even if you take it back to Kyle, it's like, here's a character that nobody knows who this is. We're used to a character that's been around for decades. How do we make this work? How can we make this interesting? And so I'm like, well, okay, well, let's look at what we have here. And then that's the challenge. Put forth the challenge in order to come up with a result that people will hopefully like. And I think they have.
Okay.
Make sure if the character is possibly a Pokemon, feel free to show it to me, and I'll probably be able to tell you who it is, if it is Pokemon or not.
I don't think it was a Pokemon. I mean, I used to watch the cartoon. This just looked like, maybe it was a little stuffed, like a little stuffed creature from like a gift shop or something like that maybe it had sentimental value to the person. I mean, it wasn't stupid looking. I mean, it's like a cute little cartoon character, but I don't know who it was, but it meant something to them. So that was unusual. I wouldn't say it's strange. I'd say it's unusual. Strange would be someone said like, oh, I want Kyle creating toilet seats or something. I'm like, that's strange. It's like, why would you want that? But,
that's out left field.
Whereas a character that I don't know who it is, that's more unusual.
Darryl, we could have you do one of our characters called the Procrastinator. How would you create that?
Yes.
I would never get around to drawing it because I'd procrastinate. That was an old super villain that I used to battle personally when I started. Procrastination, because this was back when I first started. I was really big into gaming, and I mean console gaming. So it's kind of like one more game and I'll get back to this page. And it was like, I remember being at the comic shop, and the guy goes, "I think this book was late. Were you gaming again?" I'm like, "Would I do that?" Maybe.
Who are you talking about? No.
Me?
No, and Darryl, like I've obviously told you, big fan of the work they've done over the years. I finally broke Sonny, and we did a review of Emerald Twilight. Okay. And he went out and purchased, I believe it was the collection. It was the Emerald Twilight and New Dawn.
Right there. Yep.
Good stuff.
Finally broke them.
Yes, sir. I got it. By the whole thing.
Okay. And we're going to be reviewing New Dawn, I believe, in 2 weeks on the show.
2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
But is there anything that like specific that you would recommend to those that, never had the chance to pick up something of yours? Like, is there a certain issue or story arc that, people need to see? Like, if you want to start, here you go. Like, this is what I would expect you to read.
Oh, that's hard to say. I mean, I think about things where different projects meant something different to me depending on where I was in life.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was working for Millennium Publishing, working with Mark Ellis for Doc Savage, Man of Bronze.
Yeah.
That's a legacy character that I expect, that he'll once again have his moment in the sun in live action or animation, that sort of thing. A very popular pulp character that was very influential. I mean, the character Clark Savage was an influence on Superman, even down to the name Clark. I think Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were fans of Doc Savage. I think that inspired them. So I think my work with Doc Savage is something that I feel proud of, because it was, during I still call it my learning comics era. I mean, I'm always learning, but back then, still putting it together, still trying to figure it out. I felt really good about my work with Doc Savage and my work I did with Millennium.
Awesome. How long did you work with Doc or on Doc Savage?
It was only a few issues, but it just felt like a long time because I was very slow because I was learning how to do it. But they would do specials here and there. I might, have a backup story, that sort of thing. But it was a particular story arc called Monarch of Armageddon. I'll never forget that because at one point, because Doc Savage is a huge guy, but at one point he had to face an opponent that was even bigger. And I'm thinking, two big guys hand to hand. Oh, we're getting some pro wrestling out of this. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
that to this day, I still, I apply to my work. But yeah, I would say that story arc was would be the direction I would point people as far as early work. Then of course my stuff on Legion of Superheroes, because I got to draw Matter Eater Lad. I remember when I was first allowed to do more Legion stuff beyond the annual I started with, I thought I was always intrigued by that character. I mean, it's out of all the superpowers, his superpowers, he could eat anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like and not gain a pound. So I just thought that was funny. I was like, oh yeah, these stories are going to sit around him. I'm like, this is great. So I mean, if the opportunity ever arose to even come back and do some Legion of Superhero stuff, I'd be open for that.
Oh, I'd love some new Legion of Superheroes, to be honest with you. I mean, I know they've kind of recently did some, but it didn't stick as well.
Is that right?
Yeah, I believe Bendis took over with that one for, I think it was like a 3-issue, 4-issue thing before they're like, keep worrying about, Superman for a bit.
So there's no Legion monthly title right now?
Not. I think they got Superman versus the Legion. Superman versus Legion. I think there's one going. I think it's a mini.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. I don't know if it's a mini or a maxi. I know it's one of the two, but after 52 Legion, it kind of went to me downhill on the way everyone saw it, because they were trying different teams and nothing stuck. And then there's a whole thing with Legion coming back now with Bendis, and then it just kind of went away. And now we got, I believe, Legion either versus Superman or with Superman, because it's a whole thing with, the United Planets and it.
Well, see,
I go in this all day.
Like Legion is a team that I always thought had a lot of potential, but was never allowed to be what it could have been. You know what I mean? So Darryl, on a artist aspect, what do you think you could have done to kind of boost them up to the level that you wanted to see them at?
To me, I mean, just the nature of the characters is that, I mean, there's such a trend to make everything dark. To me, Legion should be fun, all ages. That should be the book. That should be the fun book. We've got plenty of other characters in the DC universe that we can go grounded or dark or serious. But to me, I mean, you've got characters like Bouncing Boy or whatever. That should be something really fun and humorous. But I mean, you think about, we mentioned Mike Grell earlier. His run in Legion, it was fun, but I mean, there were times where playtime was over. I mean, the stories can get pretty intense. You had Dave Cockrum, the great X-Men artist, before he was doing X-Men, he was doing Legion stuff. So to me, if I could get a chance to do more Legion, it would feel kind of like that. It'd be fun, but then there would, the humor aspect would almost make, when things got serious, even more serious. To me, when you have that contrast, that really expands both. The serious makes the funnier stuff funnier, and then the humor makes the serious things more serious.
See, and I think that's something that's sorely lacking in comics right now is those books that just don't take themselves too seriously, and they put a lot of that fun aspect out there for them and for the reader to read. Because I mean, if you go into a book and you're going to be on a roller coaster, but it's not a roller coaster that's going to leave you with an existential crisis after you're done. It's a book you'll continue to go back to, and you'll want to see what kind of adventures the team is going to go on next.
Someone had said the Mark Waid, Paulo Rivera run on Daredevil had that balance of humor and action.
That was amazing.
Was okay. So you recommend that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, check that out.
When Waid was doing it, I think it was after Murdoch had been arrested and gone to prison for being Daredevil, and he still didn't want to admit that he was Daredevil, because people would come up to him and they'd be like, "You're Daredevil, aren't you?" "No, that's not me." That was
there was the one cover that he had the shirt on, and he's
I
like,
am not Daredevil.
Yeah, I'm
not
Matt and then the next one was like, I am Matt Murdock.
But the good thing about that series was it was carefree. You know, it brought Murdoch back to that carefree attitude that he had, and it brought that carefreeness into Daredevil too. And when Spider-Man would come in and swing around with him, you felt that there were no limits, and that's what made it so awesome to read.
Good.
Yeah, and also you have Chip Zdarsky's run right now, or previous run, because he's starting.
I'm on
again
issue
with
15 of that right now, and that is mind blowing.
It's amazing, and that it has that same characteristic to it, and it feels and flows so well.
Good.
So if you get a chance, definitely try to check one of those out, especially before Devil's Reign, which is his current event going on.
Yeah.
Dylan, I was going to ask you when we were.
Go ahead.
Oh, Jamie, mind? Okay. All right. So I was going to ask you about convention. Any crazy stories? Anything really wild that happened at any that stand out in your mind?
Wild in what way?
Anything happen? Anybody? Any crazy fans go up to you? Anybody? Any artists get in fights or arguments backstage? Anything?
Like a rock concert kind of deal, but at the convention.
No, fortunately, no. I mean, there was a time. I mean, as far as a negative thing, there would be a time where photographers would follow around cosplayers, and then they would just like block tables, and a lot of artists would be upset. I'm like, well, just tell them to move. One guy, he had like film cameras, and he was setting them down on my print, and I said, I just had to just come up and say, like, you can't be doing that, But there was this cosplayer versus artist mentality at one point. I'm thinking it doesn't need to be versus. Just if there's something that you don't agree with that they're doing, just tell them. It doesn't have to be I'm going to go on Twitter and tweet. I'm like, just say, hey, if they're blocking your table, you're going to have to move. And that was the end of it. But other than that, no, conventions are great. Whenever I think of wild, I think of people I either wanted to meet or have met. That's wild to me. I remember whether it's a celebrity or I remember my favorite, I think, convention moment is when I met the suit actor of the original Ultraman. And I remember there's a Facebook friend that met him at a show in LA or something like that. And I thought one of these days, would I have to fly out to LA? And so there was a show I was doing at the time in Kentucky, and I went on their Facebook page and he was announced. I'm thinking, no way, he's going to be at the same show that I'm going to be at. And so, I was brushing up I'm speak Japanese, but I know some greetings, that sort of thing. And I'm like, I'm gonna get a chance to use it with Ultraman, So I mean, we did the pose and everything. I at one point that was my background for I think for my Twitter at one point. But
awesome.
But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And once again, the people I want to see aren't necessarily people everybody else wants to see. Because at the same show, they had the cast of the Power Rangers, so everybody wanted to see them. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, and that's great. They were a great bunch. But I'm like, this is the original. And I'm like, so I got to hang around the table because he had fans, but not that many. Another time was at that same convention, not that same weekend, but another year. I'm a big fan of wrestler Big Van Vader.
Yeah.
So rest in peace. I had just posted on Twitter a Legion of Superheroes page where I kind of put him in a crowd scene.
Nice.
Big fan. Anyway, he was at a show, and once again, he didn't have a lot of people around him, and I'm like, I've got to meet him. And I did. We took a picture together, did the V pose and everything. It was great.
My brother and I were just talking about Vader and Mankind last night, and how the Vader and Mankind matches were what helped establish Mick Foley as not necessarily legitimate, but star worthy.
Yes.
Like when
Yeah.
him and Vader were doing it in WCW, and then they moved over to WWE and all that stuff. Yeah, that was a nice conversation him and I had. I loved Vader back in the day. Mick
Nice.
Foley was my guy. Mankind, that was my dude. And when he won the title, I lost it. My brain exploded at that time, and it still hasn't healed all the way.
Nice.
That both wrestlers and celebrities, they're never the height that I think they are that they look on TV.
Right.
Usually they're shorter, sometimes they're taller. Mick Foley is so much taller in real life than he looks on screen for some reason. He just never looked that tall to me. But
he's probably leaning forward a lot as Mankind.
Who else? We're talking about Wild Convention. Benedict Wong, who plays Wong in the Doctor Strange movies. We were, I was at a show in Cincinnati. We were in the green room together and sitting, having lunch. And he was, asked me where I was from. And I'm thinking, this is Wong. He was so down to earth. The thing is, I was telling my wife the same thing. Is that it doesn't matter how famous you are or how much money you have. People are people, I've been around some celebrities that seems like, like they couldn't be bothered. And there were some, I mean, they're super huge, but they're just the kindest people you would imagine. I remember I was at a show in Pittsburgh, and Ernie Hudson came up to my table and said, "Hi, I'm Ernie Hudson." I started to say, I'm going to go, everybody knows who you are. You're from Ghostbusters. But, he was just a down to earth guy. He was just like, introducing himself. I'm like, yeah, I know who you are. I was a fan before you were in Ghostbusters.
It's got to be a great feeling when Ernie Hudson comes up and introduces himself to you. That's amazing.
It is, because it just tells me they're still people, because I always try to, especially if we're in the green room eating, I always consider that Switzerland. Like, don't bother them. They're just there to eat. There are times where this might be the only chance I get to get a selfie or talk with them. I met Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
Yes.
At a show. And it was kind of like, it was just the two of us, and he was just sitting on his phone. I'm like, if he yells at me, he's going to yell at me. I don't know. Another opportunity. I said, can we take a picture of it? He was totally fine with it. And it was like, wow, my favorite version of Batman. That was great.
If he yells at you, though, you could just tell him, could you just yell at me as Batman?
Yeah, like,
get away from me.
If you're going to yell at me, can you do it properly?
Can you do it right? Yeah.
No, but, you brought up, the whole being the biggest fan of pro wrestling, growing up, having that ideal in you. I got to ask, because now this is going to bother me until I know the answer. Who's your Mount Rushmore then? Like, if you had to pick 4 from the pro wrestling scene, like growing up, who's the top 4? And if we can, the same question goes with, the heroes in comics. Who would you pick as your top 4?
For wrestling, that's hard for me to do, because I've been a wrestling fan since '86. But I would say my Mount Rushmore would be Booker T.
Okay.
Harlem Heat.
Jushin Thunder Liger. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a Japanese wrestler.
Yeah.
Kenta Kobashi.
Kenta.
Another Japanese wrestler. And the Great Muta. You ever heard of the Great Muta?
Mm-hmm.
And of course Vader. But so I know that's more than allotment of Mount Rushmore. But,
we can add faces. It's fine.
Vader, they just announced he's getting inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Is he really?
Yeah, they just announced like a couple of days ago. Yes, Vader's finally getting inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. So we're glad to hear that.
See, one of my favorite characters back in the 80s was Junkyard Dog. I just love the fact that he came out there with that chain a mile long and would just come strutting. I loved sitting there as a kid watching him come out to the ring. And when him and Hogan would team up, or him and Macho Man, that was bananas to see.
There's a show in Michigan, Warren, Michigan, where they tend to have wrestlers, and they're really approachable. I didn't go this year, but they've had at that same show I've met the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and we took a picture together. I had the $1 Million belt on my shoulder. One year they had Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who was a lot shorter than I thought he would be. I mean, he was not tiny, but it was like, in my mind, I'm thinking he's way taller than me, and he was. Who else? Sting.
Oh yeah,
was so surprising. He's so quiet in real life. The Sting you see on TV, that's a character. It's like Steve Borden is such a soft-spoken, laid-back kind of guy. It's almost like when the camera comes on, it's like somebody flipped the switch. But he was such a laid-back character. It's kind of like, wow, he was great. Because I remember when he used to wrestle in the old, what was the Mid-South wrestling?
Was that when he was doing the blonde spiky hair and
the surfer dude stuff?
The old Sting.
Yeah,
I could kind of tell he was going to be a big deal even back then. It was a tag team with him and Rick Steiner. I remember that. I thought they were a great team. This is before Scott was even wrestling. But yeah, meeting Sting in real life was great. Yeah.
We move on. But the Rushmore, the superhero Mount Rushmore, who would be yours?
Superhero Mount Rushmore. I don't know if I could do it.
You could add if you want. Don't worry.
If I had to take a shot at it, now by Mount Rushmore, you mean like just like personal favorites of who? Just some of my personal favorites.
Yeah, some of your personal favorites that you've always geared towards.
Got to put Kyle in there, but not for the reasons you would think. It's more like I really like that character, even though I had something to do with him. He'd be on there. I'd have to have. For some reason, the Vision keeps popping into my head, and normally I don't think about him, but like I said, it's hard to do. But as a kid, I always liked the Vision because he started out kind of like a villain.
Yeah,
But then we really learned so much about his character over time. So if you ask me tomorrow, this Mount Rushmore for heroes is going to be completely different. But today,
that's fine. We're worried about today.
Okay, so today I'd say okay, Kyle, the Vision, Doctor Strange. I remember years ago, Marvel used to do like written novels, like just prose novels.
Yeah.
And the Doctor Strange one I thought would be a perfect script to do a movie from. Because at the time I thought this is a great character. Everything would work cinematically, and it just never seemed to happen. But decades later we finally got it. But I've always thought that the Doc was just a really well-rounded character. Who else? Oh, I can't believe I'm talking about any kind of Mount Rushmore without mentioning one of my favorite Marvel characters of all time, Hercules.
Wow, that's okay.
Hercules, I like Marvel's take on Hercules because he's so flexible. You could put Hercules in a really serious kind of story like we've seen in Avengers. He could do humor.
Mm-hmm.
We can go ancient Greek mythology. We can put him in outer space like the old Bob Layton series. I can't think of anybody outside of maybe Spider-Man that has the flexibility of the types of stories you could tell with him. And also, we were mentioning some of the modern stuff. I was reading one of his recent series from a few years ago. That was kind of fun, where he was living in an apartment with, I think, was it Gilgamesh, something like that. Those are kind of fun. But yeah, I definitely have to mention Hercules. Anybody else? That's it for today. So when I'm on next, it'll be a totally different lineup. But
I'll tweet at you tomorrow, and we'll figure it out.
And then
Who's
figure out.
tomorrow's changing team?
I tell you, I think Hercules and Doctor Strange are going to always be on there.
Well, Darryl, one of the last questions I have for you, I think is probably the most important for aspiring creators. What advice would you give them, and what motivation would you send their way for them to continue to reach their goals?
It's got to be something that matters to you to the point where you never forget that this is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment it's not fun anymore. Now, it's not going to always be fun, the actual doing it, but it's more like the act of drawing has to be something you enjoy, because there'll be times you'll have to draw things you don't enjoy. But if you get used to enjoying drawing, period,
Mm-hmm.
you have to because you're spending so much time doing it, you better love it. And one of the reasons I decided to make art as a profession is my father, when he was still living, he retired from he worked at a steel plant, and he hated it. He retired from it, and he hated every minute of it. I thought, I can't live that way. I got to do something that I actually love to do. I mean, my father was a hard worker, great provider, but he just didn't like his job. And I thought, that's not me. That's not me. I've got to love what I'm doing. So for an inspiring artist, I would say, remember why you love to draw. Because if you do this professionally, you're going to be working on projects at some point. It's something you won't necessarily like, or whatever. It might just be, to keep the lights on, but keep loving to draw and keep drawing. And don't compare your drawing with somebody else's. Oh, if I could tell that one thing is, Instagram, you'll see someone who's working. Oh, I want to break my pencil. Don't compare your work. That's their journey. You can be inspired, but don't make a comparison where it's discouraging to you. If you enjoy doing it, your style could be in a totally different direction. Think about all the great artists over the years, from Jack Kirby to John Buscema to Jim Steranko. Everybody I just named completely different, but we love their work. Mm-hmm. How they see things, their eye is different. So just think in terms of what am I bringing different, and why do I love to draw? I know that sounds overly simplified, but having done this over 32 years, I think that's how I boil it down to, is like, it's got to still have something that's fulfilling, because God knows there's so many things in life that are not, Right. So if you have that to fall back on, like, yeah, I may not like this assignment, but I love to draw in general, that'll help push you through it.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the simplest answer that garners the best results. You know what I mean?
I mean, I would hear that sort of thing when I was starting out. I'm thinking, that can't be right. It's like, or that sounds so overly simplified. It's kind of like, yeah, but now that I'm the elder statesman, now I understand a lot of the Yoda type stuff I used to hear. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, now I kind of get it. I remember when I was sending samples before I was even published, I had a neighbor that was into comics, and he would, I would always tell him, I want to do it. He goes, oh, you're going to be published by all the big companies, you will. And I'm like, but he would say it matter of factly, not I'm pulling for you. He's like, no, you're going to do it. I'm like, but how do you know? He said, I just know. I'm like, well, I mean, did you hear from God? I mean, how do you know? Well, what it was is, it's the same thing I remember telling my students that were having that same sense of self-doubt, is that you can kind of tell by a person's character on there are certain habits that successful people, or just people who reach their goals, that they have. They're not going to let discouragement stop them. It might slow them down, but it's like the juggernaut, be unstoppable. It's more like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. I remember I had a student that was, you ever heard of the video game company Capcom?
Yes.
Yeah.
They made Street Fighter, whatever. I had a student that his goal is, I want to work for Capcom. And I was like, oh yeah, you're going to do it. Like, he would be like, how do you know? And I'm like, oh no, I'm that guy. I'm like, I know you will. And he did years later, but he did. I said, I told you. I had another student. There was a toy company years ago called Trendmasters. They did lots of things, but at one point they had the Toho license, so that's Godzilla, that sort of thing. And he goes, I really like to work for Trendmasters. Like, you're going to work for Trendmasters. And he was like, is it because you're a Christian? Is that like no, it's not a religious thing. It's more like, the guy's name was Bill. I said, Bill, every time I see you, you've got another sketchbook because you filled out the last one of your monster design. I said, let me tell you, all it's going to take is Trendmasters is going to find out you exist, and it's all over. I still remember he was sitting on a desk. I said, Trendmasters is going to find you. It's going to be all over. And that's exactly what happened. He came up to me and was like, guess what? I'm like, here it comes. I was at a show and I was talking about Trendmasters, and he was at a convention, and one of their reps was just at the same show, just walking around, and they heard me talking about it, and it just went from there. I'm like, see? But what's funny is I had that same, I just know, just like I was told it, but I'm like, you know, because there's certain things that people who are headed in a direction, you can just kind of tell, you can just kind of tell. It wasn't something really deep about it. It was more like, yeah, I mean, if you go to a gym and you see a person going, I think I'm going to lose weight. Like, every time I come in here, you've been in here for 5 hours. Yeah, you're going to keep working out. You're going to get there,
Mm-hmm.
So with aspiring artists, I would just say, if you love doing it, you're going to keep doing it. You're going to get better at anything that you practice long enough. The one thing, however, I would separate from general advice is that learn how to practice. Because, like, for example, I don't know how to golf. Giving me clubs at a golf course is not going to make me a good golfer. You know, I'd have to learn how they have to grip the club a certain way and have your feet. Once you've learned how to practice, stick to that. Because once in a while I'll see someone that showed me their work, and I can tell they're practicing, but they haven't learned what they should practice. Because honestly, in the early stages, it can be boring. I remember when I was a student, I had a teacher that was saying I needed to get better at drawing still lifes. You know, like the flowers and the pot, all that kind of stuff. I hated that stuff. Oh, I hated doing that. But thinking back, if I had a time machine, me and Kang, like, hey, take me back to when I was a kid. Yes, do that kind of stuff, because you're not just going to draw figures. You got to learn how to draw an environment, a room, and that sort of thing. All the stuff I thought was boring, that's where a lot of the power comes from. You know, and it's not necessarily in the detail. It's more like creating a sense of structure. Yeah. So I know that was kind of rambling. I hope I got to the point, but
no, that's perfect.
I would tell aspiring artists that things that that should be taken into their consideration.
Yeah, get awesome advice. Yeah, like I said, you got to stay determined. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely one thing that, I mean, that goes for everybody in that aspect, is just stay determined. You know, if you love what you do, it's not really work, so.
And that's true.
Follow your dreams.
It's true for, I mean, my daughter's a photographer, and when she was first learning it, it was, it was challenging, but it was something that was coming out of her. I think that's what it is. It's different from something you're trying to get a hold of, as opposed to something that's an expression of the real you. She may not draw, but she captures things with the lens, and so she learns all about the equipment. And it's funny to listen to her talk about that stuff. Like, I remember the day she was born, and now she's, talking about the tech specs of these cameras and lenses. I'm like, wow, that sounds like a foreign language, but it's something that it's an expression of herself. And so I think if you can find any job, no matter what it is, and you can express yourself with it, that'll definitely help, especially when things get tough or just downright boring, because it's going to happen. I mean, there were times where I'm even drawing Green Lantern, which was a dream job. It's once in a while, I'm just not inspired. It's not every day. Like, I sit at the table, I'm like, "Woo, let's do this." It's like there are times where, like, oh, I just feel like just turning on the TV and just vegging out for a while. It happens.
Oh, I've done that a few times. Trust me. Especially, it's definitely one of those things where, how can I put it? Like, even though you love it, it's you just need a little bit of you to be, rejuvenate.
Yeah. That's what vacations are for. It's
yes.
The older I get, I realize vacations aren't something that you should take. You got to.
You need a vacation from your vacation.
There you go.
But yeah, well, Darryl, I appreciate all the time that you've given us today. It just every time we've talked to you so far, it's been nothing but, I don't even know what the word to use for it is. It's just been inspiring.
Do that.
Yeah, it's been inspiring. It's been appreciative. It just to give us an insight into your world from the people that saw it firsthand is just remarkable. So thank you again for being on here today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, before we get out of here, Darryl, do you have any social media or any sites or Kickstarters that you got going on that you want to plug real quick?
Just stay tuned, especially as the work that Ron and I are doing gets more closer to when they want to announce it, whatever. I'll probably be later on the year. Be looking for both of our announcements probably on Twitter, especially. Okay. And I also post on Instagram as well. Now, speaking of Kickstarter, I don't know if I had mentioned, Ron and I, we did a Kickstarter graphic novel called Harkin's Raiders.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago. That was the Kickstarter, and that was something else, because it was a historic story that's grounded in reality, and I had to reference everything. I couldn't make up anything, well, except the characters. But I can't draw a World War II playing out of my head. So I just remember everything had to be referenced. And also, as a part of the Kickstarter, my very first art sketchbook was a part of the process. So
that's awesome.
Is that Ultraman on the cover?
He's Ultraman-esque. They just wanted something. It couldn't be Green Lantern. He said it can't be something copyrighted. So I'm like, so I went through old sketches. It's kind of an amalgam of certain things I've created. It's got that Ultraman-esque idea behind it. But these still might be available on ominouspress.com. I don't know if they're sold out. They may not be, but I think Harkins Raiders might also still be available. So yeah, there's that. So, and also be looking for the upcoming issue of Nubia and the Amazons that I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what else, because keeping busy is the name of the game.
Always.
All right. Well, everybody, I'll let you guys. I know Tim or Jamie who wants to do the like subscribe thing.
We'll just go in order like we do
Okay.
when we end the podcast.
Okay.
Go ahead, buddy.
Well, from me, Sonny Cougar, thank you everybody for tuning in to our special interview with Darryl Banks. Darryl, again, thank you for doing this interview with us. We look forward to maybe doing this again sometime. But anyway, it's been a great time. Thank you for all your advice, answering all our questions and everything. Spending time with us, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you soon on more episodes of the Codex Podcast and everything else we do. And for me, Sonny Cougar, take care.
And everybody, as always, be kind to one another. You never know what anyone's dealing with out there, especially what's going on right now in the world. Follow, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because there's so much content that I and us are putting out. It makes my head hurt. So Darryl, thank you again for being on. And everybody, tonight we will be doing another live Codex After Dark. It'll be me, Tim, and I believe Matt again.
Mhm.
I don't know if he is. Okay, confirm. Yep. Matt's gonna be on. So definitely give that a check out. And thank you again, Darryl, once again for being on today.
Thank you.
And don't forget, guys, you can find us on all the social medias: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, right here on YouTube, over there on Twitch, and anywhere podcasts are streamed. Don't forget to follow the immortal Darryl Banks at Instagram and Twitter at Real Bankster. Codex podcast episodes come out every Wednesday at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, 5:30 Central. So be sure to join us there. We are live every Wednesday right here on YouTube. Once again, guys, this is the Codex Station Special Edition with the immortal Darryl Banks. Nice, beautiful fireside chat. My name is Tim. This guy over here is Jamie. Down in the corner is the immortal Sonny. And right below is the wonderful, amazing, and super talented Darryl Banks. You guys have a wonderful day.
Take care.
See you guys in the next one.